Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the June 5th, 2025 meeting of the Somerville Planning Board. I'm Mike Capuano. I'm the chairman of the planning board. With me tonight is the vice chair, Amelia Aboff, our clerk, Jahan Habib, our members, Michael McNeely, Luke Schuster, and Lynn Richards. We have a quorum this evening. We have a number of items on our agenda, but first, pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting of the Planning Board is being conducted via remote participation. Video recording of the proceedings will be available on the city's website's meetings and events page or by emailing planningboard@somervillema.gov. So yep, okay. So our agenda tonight are a new public hearing for 483 Broadway. We will then we'll take a presentation from that applicant. And before we get into any debate or discussion, we will rejoin with the Land Use Committee for a joint hearing on one item, and then we will reconvene as the planning board to take up any more of the Broadway applicant. We will also take up the Assembly Square neighborhood plan. So what I'd like to do now is invite the applicant, or actually ask Jahan to read into the record the notice of public hearing for 483 Broadway. And at the same time, if we could have the applicant and their team be unmuted and shared.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. 483 Broadway, Babbitt Design proposes to develop a commercial building in the MR4 zoning district, which requires a site plan approval, ZP 25-000002. Babbitt Design proposes alcohol sales use in the MR4 zoning district, which requires a special permit, ZP 25-000004.
Thank you. And I do see Havis Babbitt, who has joined our meeting. Mr. Babbitt, is there anybody else on your team that needs to be recognized, promoted, have their screen shared, or whatever it's going to be?
Not promoted, no. The owner may be on, John Wood. He may interject at some point if needed, but at the moment I'll be the only one presenting any, screens, or mostly doing the talking.
Yeah, sounds good. And I will just ask, as a reminder, anybody who's both presenting before the planning board and anybody that's going to be providing testimony before the planning board, please introduce yourself, your name, and your address.
Gladly. My name is Tavis Babbitt. I have a company, Babbitt Design. I'm part of the design team for this project. John Wood is the owner. My address is 85 McGurty Road in Eastham, Massachusetts. So I am not nearby like I used to be.
Are you on Cape now?
I am. Yeah.
I'm not too far from you as we speak. So.
All right. Nice day here, of course. But my purpose in being here is to try and get this approval that we've been working on for about 4 years now. We've, as you've seen in the notes, most likely we've had 6 requests and granted hardship variances through the Zoning Board of Appeals. And that's in an effort to really extend a building that is entirely in Medford at the moment, so that the owner, John Wood, who's been a business owner in Somerville for 34 years, can build a place to move his business, Woody's Liquor. He's already at 523 Broadway, and his goal was really in purchasing the property to expand the building so it worked for his business and he could stay in the neighborhood and still continue to be a business owner in Somerville. And again, he's been trying to get this approved. It's not been the easiest. Medford has approved what we've presented, and that did, because the building is mostly in Medford, it did dictate a lot of the design decisions and the proportions, as well as the number of stories, hence the requests for the hardship variances that we looked for due to the requirements really of Medford's, because really only 19% of the footprint is in Somerville. So if you've looked at the property, you might be familiar with the building. It's a pretty disheveled old laundromat at the moment. However, there is, as they say, some good bones there, and so the owner was electing to try and save as much of the existing structure as possible. And so in an effort to do that, we're going to be maintaining essentially 3 of the walls and the roof structure to be used and extending that into the new space. So that was one of the reasons we went with the design we did. I'm going to share my screen if I can, just to show the design that we've been working on. And let's see here, I have to request that.
Steve,
There we go.
does Tavis have
I do
screen
now.
share capacity?
Yes, he should now.
Okay.
Yes, I do now. Thank you very much. So this is as you know, this is the current property and the state it's in. It's probably not quite as good as that is anymore. It's been a few years since that picture. So what we've been proposing is a building that incorporates, as you can see, some of the old structure, but also kind of merging the old and the new. As you'll see down the street here, there is some of that same brick and being used across the street. So our idea was to kind of maintain some of that integrity with the neighborhood for the Medford side, and then obviously Somerville is kind of has a lot of new buildings going up and has a different presence, you could say. And so that's why we did the change in materials based on feedback from many inputs through neighborhood meetings. And so that's where we ended up with this 2-story building. And again, we do have restrictions in Medford on height and number of stories. And so 2 is the maximum, and that gives our owner as much space as he needed. And so that was really how we ended up here with this design. And so our intention was really looking at the existing property. There really wasn't much use of this space in front of the building. There were parking spaces that were insufficient, too small. You couldn't actually park a car and keep it on the property entirely. They were just too short. So in the end, we decided that really wasn't going to work anyway. So we wanted to just reclaim as much space as we could for the building so that we could maximize the use instead of having, unused open space there. And so that's, again, the reason we expanded into Somerville as opposed to staying with the existing structure or even just keeping it in Medford. As you probably saw too in the notes, we've worked on the access as well. I don't think I have the site information here with the parking, but we have a loading and unloading zone that we're proposing in the front, and that can be a parking space temporarily for 1 to 2 cars, and also loading and unloading for the vehicles that once a week maybe we'll be having deliveries for the actual liquor store that we're proposing. I don't know if you wanted to get into the mobility parts on that, but or just talk about the architectural parts. So I'll let you direct that.
You know what, Tavis, actually, yeah, because I am curious, and I know some of my fellow board members are also always curious about some of the loading issues as it
Sure.
relates to the property, especially if you're getting
Yep.
rid of some of the parking spaces in the front to expand the building.
Yep, absolutely. Let me pull up the mobility here. I don't know if, let me see, I got to share a different screen then. 1 second. Let's go to that one here. So this is the plan here that we have for the front entrance area. So we don't have a lot of permanent delivery trucks coming. So what we have is a proposed loading and unloading zone, which would also be, temporary parking for those that might come in for the liquor store. According to the owner, the primary access to his current business is foot traffic and bicycles and things like that. So it's really not a lot of people pulling up and driving into this location. And the deliveries, are really for every Tuesday, I guess the owner said it's once a day, once a week. And it's not an extended period of time, usually very early in the morning. So this would really limit the amount of parking needed out front for the actual business that he's proposing. all the deliveries would happen out front and then be brought back onto the side doors here, either into the cooler or into the loading area. So that's the only areas that we would need for the business, and so everything else is available for public use after those particular periods. And it's essentially the same setup that he currently has on Broadway. It's the same loading zone that he has in front of 523 Broadway. So we wanted to continue that same concept. And again, going back to the existing parking areas. So the depth here from the building, and these ones that were there were really right against the building, and so there was no buffer. And so there to the edge of the property was 18 feet. And so even if we didn't expand the building at all and just kind of left those parking spaces, which you can see really are tight and not accurate in terms of what a modern parking space would be. That was the reason we decided to continue the bike lane and the sidewalk all across the front, because that's primarily what's going to be the traffic there and not parking. So did that help on the mobility side of things? Hopefully. And let's see here. As far as the green areas and the plantings and things, we have been working hard on getting that green score above the minimum. So what we had planned here, I can show you that. After several iterations, we decided we had planter boxes before, but that just seemed to be questionable. Is it movable? Is it immovable? What, how does it drain? So we decided to just purely do planting areas instead that are flush with the ground, essentially. And so that becomes our landscape on the first level here. And then on the roof, we have a green roof in the Somerville part of the part of the building here. And that achieves our green score that we were looking for, which is above the minimum requirement. As you'll see, we have some details on the plantings and the materials we'll be using for the drainage so that we can achieve the right drainage so it is, pervious, not a solid surface. And same with the roof, we have design here for the plantings as well as the drainage system and how that's actually going to be built so that it will stay green. That's the plan anyway. So these are some of the things we've been working on. As you can see, the space, if I go back to the architectural plans, the space proposed, let me hear the architectural plans. The space that we're actually proposing for use, we have two spaces, retail space on the side at 757 square feet, and then the liquor store, which would be the primary use here, would be 1729. And as far as the needs of the client and the owner, this is really all the space he needed. And so the second floor really is extra storage space, which will store long-term things and supplies. And there's also some storage here for the unit over here. So those are the two stories that are planned, and the design, again, in Somerville, we went with more of a commercial look here with the building materials and window styles. Versus what we had originally proposed, which was more in line with the Medford area, which was more residential. So I think we worked pretty hard on tying the two together, trying to keep it in keeping with the neighborhood. Many of the buildings along Broadway are 1 to 3 story brick buildings along that stretch. And so we were trying to keep in that sort of range as well when we came up with the design. So I'm happy to take questions if you'd like to move forward.
Yeah. So Tavis, here's where we're gonna go. We're at 6:17 right now.
Okay.
So in 13 minutes, we have to convene with the land use committee. And that I don't anticipate that's going to take terribly long. We only have one agenda item. What I'd like to do is have an idea of, because we have about 10 folks who are listed as attendees here. And I don't know how many, if any, want to give public testimony. So
Right.
what I think I want to do to maximize kind of the efficiency of our hearing is if I can get I'm not going to necessarily open public testimony right now, but if I can get a list of hands to see how many people we're actually talking about. So anybody that wants to testify, I got 1, 2, 3. Okay, so far I only have 3 people who want to give public testimony.
Okay.
I think what I'd like to do is take their testimony now. Respecting the fact that we do need to take a pause in 12 minutes. 3 people. And reconvene. Hopefully their testimony will take less than 12 minutes. Hint, hint, it should. We will reconvene after the public as a joint hearing with the Land Use Committee, and we can continue our discussion as the planning board with you. Okay, so that's
Good.
that's where I think we're at right now to maximize our time. So what I'd like to do now is open it up to public testimony. Knowing that we have 11 minutes before we have to convene with the Land Use Committee, I would ask for anyone testifying to kind of, not curb your testimony, but respect the idea that we will have to bounce in a few minutes. So what I'm going to do now is open up the public testimony, and I would like to invite Joe Lynch to testify if Joe can be unmuted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have you got me?
Yes, Joe, we have you.
Thank you to the chair. Thank you to the committee. My name is Joe Lynch. I'm chair of the Somerville Licensing Commission. As you know, the Woody's Liquor, the applicant that's in front of you, is a long-established liquor store in the Magoon Square area. I've followed the saga with our friends in their planning board, zoning board, and all of the neighborhood meetings. I'm not here to make testimony, yes or no. What I would like the planning board to be well aware of is that this licensee also has conditional license approval from the licensing commission for the new site that's under consideration by your board. I will make you aware that under the rules of the state, I cannot keep that provisional license open at the state level for much longer. I've been pleading with the ABCC to keep it open, to keep the license with them, provisional approval. So I would just urge expediency on this one. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the committee.
Thank you, Joe. And Joe, I'm not going to ask you now. This is not question and answer, but please hang on until we hear the other 2 folks. I will have a question for you.
That I will. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
The next person I see is Pam Tulapoulos. I might be mispronouncing your name, and I apologize.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I've attended other meetings as well with some.
I'm sorry. Can I just ask you to please introduce yourself, your
sorry,
name and address?
Pam Tulopoulos. And our family has owned the 6-unit property at 11 Strathmore, which is diagonally across the side of the building where the plans are being discussed. So two questions, and I know Tavis is nodding his head because I've spoken at meetings before. We have been looking at graffiti on the side of that building for years, and we have called Medford, we have called Somerville over and over and over again. And so nothing happens. And at the last meeting, the owner of the property agreed to address that, and that hasn't happened. So that's a concern. And I would hope that somehow that can be resolved. And second quick question is, as far as parking is concerned, along that side of that building, is that going to remain residential parking?
So this is not a question and answer period, but
okay, well,
we'll address that when we
okay.
reconvene after
All
testimony.
right, that's fine. Well, the concern would be to maintain residential parking if possible. I guess that's a statement I would like to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last person with their hand raised that I see right now is James Tamilio. Can Mr. Tamilio please be unmuted?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. My name is James Tamilio. I am a landlord at 474 Broadway, so right across the street, Unit 23. This is the first meeting that I've attended, and I just wanted to voice my concerns about the length of time that it has taken to bring a project to fruition here. I've owned the property since 2012. And so I believe the fire took place in 2014. So it's been a ridiculous amount of time. And again, this is the first meeting that I've attended, so I don't know who is to blame for that. But I'm just very concerned about the state that the property is in. I agree with the last person who spoke. There's graffiti all over the place. There's smashed glass. Not sure if that's been cleaned up. There's vagrancy that there in front of the building. It's brought down my property value. There's another unit in my building that's been on the market now for, I think, at least 3 or 4 months. And so it's bringing down the desirability of the neighborhood, and I need something to happen fast. I've lodged complaints before, I mean, years ago, and nothing happened. And so I just wanted to express my frustration.
Thank you very much. Next person I see, and I just want to make note of the fact that we have 6 minutes before we have to convene with the Land Use Committee. I only see 2 more people, so let's keep that in mind. Next person I see is Tori Antonino.
Hi, Tori Antonino, 65 Boston Street. My main concern about this is, why can you just please do a full green roof? It looks like you're only doing the green roof on the Somerville side because, you know, we've worked hard on getting green roofs, but it would benefit your entire building, and it would help with mitigating stormwater. If you continued that, I would really, I know you don't have the obligation, but it would really, I think it would enliven your building and help with stormwater management, and would be say an act of good faith to do it. And I'm just one concern I have. I'm just looking at the plant list. I'm an ecological landscaper. I see 3 shrubbery, and thank you for the button bush. That's a lot of fun. But I do see Zoysia japonica, and I'm not familiar with that. So I don't really. I know you don't have a lot of space, and that is problematic when we come up with, you know, with our MR4s, because it's building to the lot line. I'm not sure exactly the step backs, but it's pretty a full building that doesn't provide much open space, and you know, we got to work on our green score for that. But I would just ask for to expand the green roof, and on your green roof to please use native plants. And I know you. And perhaps just add a little more biodiversity. And I just love to see a plant list. And if it's only those 3 plants, I'm a little disheartened. So I'd just like to see a full plant list. And I think support this project. It's I support commercial. So thank you.
Thank you, Tori. And the last person that I see with their hand raised is Alicia Hunt. So if Alicia Hunt could please be unmuted.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Alicia Hunt. I am the Director of Planning, Development, and Sustainability in the City of Medford. And I just wanted to make my presence known in case there's any questions or things that I can do, sorry, that could be of assistance to this board this evening in answering your questions. I wasn't planning to speak, but I realized that you should know that I was available if it could be helpful.
Ms. Hunt, thank you very, very much.
And I'll stay on for later.
No, I appreciate it. So for logistical purposes, I appreciate that. Anybody else who wants to testify in the last 3 minutes before we have to recess? I see, well, Joe, you already spoke, but I see John Wood. If John Wood could please be unmuted.
Yep.
Yep. Hello.
Hi. Hello there. John Wood here, the owner of the building. I just wanted to answer to the 2 people that talked about the graffiti. I have been out there numerous times. I don't know about the side of the building. I didn't see any graffiti the last time I was there, which was about 3 days ago. But I have had a painter go out and paint over the front of the building about 4 or 5 times. There was definitely been some vagrancy. There was a homeless man that was living there. We got him removed and put him in the proper place. I have been doing my due diligence, keeping up with the property, with everything that's gone on. I have been trying to get this place in there, me moving in there and getting rid of all of the graffiti and everything else, for about 7 years now. So I just want to let everybody know that I am not an owner that, is not present. I am in that building. I've been in my building now for 35 years nearly. And I plan on hopefully being there for another long time, another 20 years, God willing. But I have been taken care of and trying to keep up with all of the riffraff that has gone on, since the building has been sitting there. I won't waste any more of your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mr. Wood. Joe, your hand is up. You already testified and we're 30 seconds out from meeting to
And-
recess. What?
And Mr. Chair, I'll be attending the planning board. If you need me back to ask any questions, I'll be happy to attend.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so I don't anticipate this land use committee joint hearing taking terribly long. So yeah, I'm not gonna make a bet with our liaison this time as to how long, but I think it's not gonna take terribly long. So I do welcome you all to come back or to just stay on this link for a while. The land use committee does have a different link. It is a different meeting. And I appreciate everybody's testimony. I appreciate everybody's comments. And I look forward to taking this back up as soon as we can. So what I'm going to do at this point is close public testimony, or oral testimony rather, and I'm going to also recess the planning board for the purpose of us convening at a separate link with the land use committee. What will happen is our staff liaison, Steve, will put up a little in recess graphic so that this link will always stay active for anybody that wants to rejoin, and the planning board will be back as soon as we can. The planning board is in recess and we will see everybody soon. Thank you.
That wasn't bad, right?
Okay. Hello, everybody. It's 6:46 PM. We have now returned from our joint hearing. I'm Mike Capuano, the chairman of the planning board. We have Amelia, our vice chair, Jahan, our clerk, our members Michael, McNeely, Luke Schuster, and Lynn Richards. We have a quorum to reconvene. I'm going to take agenda items out of order, and I am going to move that we recommend adoption of the item that was the subject of the joint hearing that the land use committee also just voted to recommend to the council. So we're a step behind them, but only by 2 minutes. Seconded by Amelia. Steve, actually, before I do that, does anybody have any comments or questions on this agenda item? Seeing none. I move. Amelia has seconded. Steve, can you call the roll, please?
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Lynn Richards,
Aye.
Amelia Aba,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. That is the expediency with which I like to see stuff. Okay, we're going to bring 483 way back. Woody's Liquors. Hey, Travis. So, okay. So thank you, everybody, for reconvening after a very lengthy and contentious land use committee meeting. So we've heard your presentation. We have taken public testimony. Oral testimony in this agenda item has closed. I do think I want to leave written comment and written testimony open. And just because I don't know if we're gonna be at a point, we're gonna take a vote on yours this evening. Our next meeting is not actually until July 17th, but what I'd like to know is Joe Lynch still in the audience? Okay. Joe, could I get you for a second? Are you unmuted?
Steve Carey, he should be unmuted now.
I'm back, Mr. Chair. I'm
Okay.
following you through planning and land use.
We're all over the map tonight, Joe.
I will have to say, Chair Capuano, I have deferred coming to your meeting tonight rather than the Roosevelt Awards in Boston with the Lieutenant Governor and James Taylor. So feel privileged, Planning Board.
Thanks, Joe.
I'm not nearly as cool as James Taylor, or the LG, to be fair. Could I ask a clarifying question from you? You indicated earlier during testimony that the ABCC is only going to keep this license open for a period of time. Wondering if you might be able to let us know when that is, because our next meeting isn't until July 17th, because our next meeting would ordinarily be on the 19th, but that's the Juneteenth holiday. And then we would be butting up only having one meeting in July. So I just want to make sure I don't unduly prejudice this applicant by leaving stuff open for too long.
Understood. I thank you for the consideration, Chair. It is basically left up to the local licensing authority. So it would be the Somerville Licensing Commission who makes the plea to the ABCC that there are circumstances that they have to take under consideration for them not to revoke the license, whether it's provisional or a permanent license. So this licensee, as he has testified to you, has been in good standing with the city for over 30 years. He's relocating. That relocation was worked out with the City of Medford Licensing Commission. And under the rules that we have from the state and the local licensing authorities, it is the address that dictates the license. So we cannot interfere with what the planning board is doing, but we have our own rules and regs at the state level. It's called pocketed licenses. So we cannot allow this provisional license to stay in play much longer. And that's my plea to your board.
Okay, so Joe, my question to you is, if we were to take discussion this evening and discussion between the board, the applicant, and staff tonight, and leave written comment open and reconvene and take this up again, likely for a vote on July 17th, is that putting you all in a bind?
An email from the chair of the Somerville Licensing Commission to the ABCC that they anticipate taking this up in July would suffice.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to make sure that by taking this up tonight and leaving it open, as you know, we tend to do for at least one meeting, unless it's like super controversial, isn't going to prejudice this applicant. So I appreciate the information, Joe.
Mr. Chair, and to the board, thank you very much.
Of course. Okay, so let's chat, folks. I have some thoughts on this application, and I'm sure you all do too. So let's hear it. Who would like to go first? I see Luke with a regular hand instead of the yellow hand. That's okay.
There's your Simpsons hand for you too.
I'll recognize Bart Simpson. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks a lot. Yeah. I just want to check that I'm tracking things right, and then I have a question. For something in MR4, the minimum that the city of Somerville requires is 3 stories. They've gotten a hardship variance to go just to 2. My understanding is that's driven by what Medford's allowing, and that Medford's the vast majority of the property. I just would be curious to hear a little bit more from our planning staff about how, and maybe this is just not common enough that there really is a standard, but when properties are split on a municipal boundary like this, how do we handle it? From my vantage point, I'll just say, seems like a bummer to only get 2 stories on this site right near the middle of Magoon Square. Would love some mixed use with housing above it. Now, maybe this is all moot because the hardship variance has been approved and it's not appropriate for us to even consider that anymore. So set me straight if anybody wants to, but that's the main thing on my mind when I look at this proposal.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Amelia, go for it.
If I can just add to Luke's question, I had asked Steve if Sarah or Steve could be prepared to talk a little bit about the Broadway corridor study, which my understanding was part of the intent of that was to try and bring Somerville zoning and Medford zoning along that boundary line into alignment. So Luke, if it's okay to piggyback on your question, that might be a small part of the answer.
Yeah, mush it all together.
And by the way, I want to recognize that we also have Ms. Hunt still with us as well on the Medford side. If Sarah, you want to include her in the discussion as well.
Absolutely. So thank you, Amelia. That was a great great segue. As far as the details, our fearless coordinator, Steve, was the project manager. And so if I say anything wrong, he will correct me. But we have just finished the Broadway corridor study that looked specifically at the split parcels with Medford. One of the recommendations in there was and I loved seeing Alicia here tonight, because one of the recommendations was that we do, sort of at least coordinate on our processes. There's basically zoning changes needed on both sides that we haven't dug into in full detail yet, mostly because Medford is going through a larger zoning overhaul that we obviously went through leading up to the new ordinance in 2019. So it's one of those things that does need to be better coordinated, but unfortunately, Luke, you are right. This particular site has had, sort of all the approvals gone through, and we are stuck with the existing zoning on both sides of the line. So on the Medford side of the line, and trying to at least make a reasonable building.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just a follow-up. I just want to make sure I'm clear around procedurally what's appropriate for us to be considering given where this is. So how should we
Luke, let me frame it for you then, if I can answer the
That's
question.
great. Yeah.
The applicant has received a number of variances from the ZBA, which means that the project that they have come forward with to us is compliant with zoning. So I share, for example, your concern that this building theoretically should be taller and bigger and more integrated into the Somerville Broadway fabric. But they have received variances that allow them to present this, and this is compliant. So does that help answer kind of the framework of your question?
And that's what my sense was. So thank you, because the special permit portion of this vote does not have to do with the height. It's just about the alcohol license. So we don't have the discretion on that anymore. Yeah. Okay. No, I appreciate that fact. Thank you.
Lynn.
Thank you, Michael. So piggybacking on Luke's question, and thank you, Michael, for your clarification. I guess my question would be to the applicant of why to seek, if Medford's in the middle of a code overview, why seek a variance from Somerville and not a variance from Medford? Because, building's going to be around for several decades. So again, I'm just kind of curious. I understand that the Somerville portion of it is very small. This isn't going to be a deal killer, but it's just, if I was in the applicant's position and knowing what Medford is going through, I would have gone to Medford for a variance to go up to 3 stories to be in compliance with Somerville, particularly given it's right in the ball square, walk shed. So if someone, and maybe it's the Medford planning director, could speak to that, or it just feels to me that that's where the missing opportunity is, that's where the variance should have been sought, not on the Somerville side.
So actually, I would love if Alicia's still with us. I am curious to know where Medford is looking. Obviously, you're still kind of like mid process is my guess. Just curious where you guys kind of are at with this, corridor, where your neighborhoods are at, where your counselors are at, where your administration is at, just because it's nice to know what we might be able to expect.
Mr. Chair, thank you for asking. This applicant actually came to the city of Medford back in 2021 and I understand that this process has been going on actually for many years in Somerville as well. And at that time, they applied for several variances under the existing zoning that existed, and they were granted their variances in July of 2021 from the city of Medford. And at that time, actually, our zoning board was concerned about what they might do on a second floor, and actually asked them to reappear before the board before they were to do something on the second floor, because we actually did not have a use even conceived of as of mixed use that would allow residential above commercial, which is, frankly, in this day and age, insane. But also at that time, there was no expectation that Medford would undertake a major rezoning project. There was no expectation that the zoning in this neighborhood or pretty much anywhere in Medford would change substantially. And there was no reason why the applicant would even consider. And in fact, he would have purchased the building knowing that this was a single story or 2-story building that there really wasn't a chance of getting a change. That said, we have met with Somerville. We did go through this project. We are considering changes throughout the city of Medford now, but that is a very current, and I'm concerned about harming somebody who purchased a property years ago when there was truly no expectation that he could get those kinds of variances or that it would be asked of him. Whereas at this time we have some draft zoning in front of us. We've passed our Mystic Ave corridor and our Salem Street corridor, and the planning board is looking at residential zoning at this time. And I think we're probably a month or two from the city council referring something to the community development board to review that is zoning that would encompass this area. Although we've started to talk about it. I don't know that we would require 3 stories. I think we would allow 3 stories.
That's really, really helpful and informative. So I appreciate that. And I totally agree with you that because we see it, or I've seen it a lot, because I've been on the board for quite a while as we've changed our zoning, obviously, substantially in 2019, 2020, but prior to that, we've done things piecemeal. And so we've had numerous applicants who have been subject to old zoning who are now being expected to comply with new zoning and kind of vice versa. So I totally get why this particular applicant would have said, Medford, you guys are where you are in 2021. I have no idea where you're going to be in 2025. So I'm going to ask Somerville, because at least Somerville had our comprehensive zoning overhaul in 2019, 2020. So our expectations were known at the time when this person bought the building, and yours necessarily weren't. So I get all that, and I very much appreciate the context. So
you're welcome, and thank you very much for asking. We do keep asking the applicant, when are you going to open? What's going on here? At some point,
me too.
As soon as possible.
Yeah.
I've been a patron of Woody's for a while, and I'm looking forward to the new location.
Mr. Chair, Joe Lynch from the Licensing Commission, we keep asking the applicant the same question.
Thank you, Joe.
Wonderful. I appreciate all of the input from you folks. Does anybody else on the planning board have any comments or questions that they'd like to raise at this time? Kind of knowing the universe where we're at. Yeah, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 3 quick questions kind of increasing in importance to me. The first one was, between the materials I've seen in the package, on the left-hand side, plan left, I've noticed that there's some inconsistencies with the plantings that are kind of facing was now Salvation Army. Can you explain to me whether or not you intend to plant along that entire wall, or if it really is going to be kind of stunted into the Somerville area?
Yes, so there is a small strip of area that we can plant along the side of the building, and that's our intention, is to plant native plants. We're thinking grasses there, to just keep some green space, some separation there from the parking lot between the building. So that was the intention there.
Okay, so my ask would be if you could just make sure that our documents are consistent, and that they all have the plantings there. But I think that's more than enough, so I appreciate you doing that.
Okay.
Second is, you highlighted that a lot of the traffic coming here is by foot, and I think there's tons of ways for folks to get here by foot and also by bike. Obviously, there's lots of ways for people to get there by bike since the bike lane's right there. Can you explain to me where you expect people to park their bikes when they arrive?
Yeah, so what the thought was that there would be space on the sidewalk areas if we proposed some trees out front that we were working with the town on to try and get those consistent, because as you go down the street, you see plantings of trees at a regular increment. And so around one of those areas, we were planning on putting a parking spot for bikes. I don't know if John, you wanted to weigh in on that.
Yeah, so I don't know if anybody can hear me, but yeah, generally, it's we're gonna put maybe a bar just right in front of the store, maybe to the right of the sign. There isn't a whole lot of room, unfortunately, for probably maybe one or two bikes, as I don't get a lot of bikers currently, but on an occasion I do, and they usually park it on the pole that's out front, the loading zone sign. Kind of a temporary thing, but it works, and they're more than welcome to use the pole. Like maybe we can set something up around the sign pole for them to put something on. But unfortunately, there isn't a whole lot of room for like bike spots. So it's very tight, unfortunately.
Sure, and I recognize that this isn't a concert venue where people are going to
Yeah,
be stacking up. I get that, but you know, one
yeah,
or two spaces I think would
yeah. I
be
think we'll have
reasonable.
that. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll definitely have that. Yep.
Okay, so if you guys have that at the next meeting, that would be great. And the third one is a little bit open-ended, and so I would just kind of love to hear your thought process as you submitted this application and conversed with the city. And it's basically around the existing bike lane. So I appreciate that this reflects a scenario that you currently have down the street. I will say they're a little bit different in that your loading area is actually closer to the sidewalk, and the bike lane kind of tucks more into the motor vehicle traffic. This is a little bit different. This actually has the loading zone, then the bike lane, then the sidewalk. And, a lot of other parts of the city where this configuration exists, I think it's nice in that you have cars kind of protecting the cyclists. So I do like this structure in a lot of ways, but it also can lead to a lot of conflicts with cyclists kind of coming down that lane. And by the time they're in this section, as they're approaching the light, they're kind of in full speed from the hill. You're starting to go downhill a bit. And so I just wanted to see how the conversations went about making sure that there aren't some scenarios where you have loaders or customers kind of conflicting with those cyclists. And if there's any other thoughts you guys had to putting in some type of safety tools to prevent those issues.
Yeah, I think your observation is probably most accurate with the protection thought, or the way that cars would not be interrupting the bike path. And so keeping that outside of that lane of traffic, you're really looking at either a door and somebody with a dolly, which is a lot more controlled way to view what's happening around you, as opposed to a car just not seeing somebody and turning into that lane. So I think that was kind of the idea with keeping that outside of there. And as you mentioned, there is potential for some speed on the bikes coming down there. So again, smaller objects, people, doors, dollies versus vehicles and trucks that don't always have the best visibility. Thought that might be the better scenario.
Sure. Is there any other thought to maybe setting some type of visual signal such that people are a little bit extra aware of that interaction? Like maybe either putting a couple of posts up in the striped area, or finding a way to raise the bike lane in that zone, or anything else like that? Because I know your drawings include the dolly kind of going up to the corner and then working their way back into the doorway. But as someone who's operated a dolly a bunch in my life, I also could just see them going right over the curb. And so that space to see oncoming traffic from the cyclists might be limited.
Mm-hmm. And I think, our experience in probably that sort of scenario analysis is probably not as expansive as maybe some of the planners on Somerville's board and the mobility department. So, I mean, we're happy to defer to input on altering that and what we can do to improve the safety there. Obviously, that's most important. We first and foremost, we want to make sure it's usable for everybody and that we can function without interrupting anyone else's, day or hurting anyone. Certainly, safety is most important. So,
yeah, appreciate that. So, any thoughts you guys have ahead of the next meeting again would be greatly appreciated. And just to kind of conclude here, really excited about this project. Obviously, this space needs to be redeveloped, and I'm really appreciative of the fact that this applicant has been very patient through this process. So, thank you for sticking with it.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Anybody else on the planning board with anything they'd like to raise? I think that we're expecting a little bit of a response from the applicant and team when we next convene on the 17th. Luke,
Yeah. Thank you, sorry. I'm really pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I just can't help myself but ask. It seems plausible to me that I'm nervous I'm missing a key detail, but let me just say it. Seems like there's some interest on our side in if there was a way to get this building to 3 stories, that would be closer to our vision for this corridor. And if the Medford plan is likely headed in that direction in only 3 months or something, which is my understanding of what I heard from the planning director in Medford, if that were not also something the applicant actually would be happy to get a 3rd story, is it not actually just worth taking a second to pause if that's I'm usually the person frustrated by how much we slow these things. But I just wonder if 3 months buying a 3rd story actually is good on everybody's plate. But
Luke, ordinarily I would agree with you that it would make sense to see when Medford comes out, but I see 2 hurdles there. In my estimation, one is I can't guarantee that Medford's going to do anything in 2 to 3 months, right? Whether it's going to be 2 to 3 months or anything at all. We think, right? We may think that they may go in a particular direction. Ms. Hunt has represented that there is kind of forward movement there, but I can't guarantee that anything's going to happen. That's part one. Part two is, as Chairman Lynch indicated, that there is a concern that the licensure issue is a consideration in moving this forward and not having some open-ended continuation to see where Medford might go. So in order to respect this applicant's ability to operate the business, kind of in the reality of it, Luke, you've been around. It took us 9 years to get a comprehensive zoning overhaul that actually passed. If Medford can get it done in one rotation, props to them. We did not. So I've seen where it goes. So I'm on board with you that maybe if Medford decides to modify the zoning on their side of the line, if this applicant comes back to us in a couple of years and says, you know what, I have this 2-story building, I'd really like to build it up to 4 and include mixed use, I'm going to be right there with you.
That's the plan.
Cheering them on. But at the stage that we're at right now on June 5th, 2025, with Medford being kind of in the middle of its process, which might not be the middle, might be the beginning. And with the consideration of the licensure, I'm just cautioning putting this particular applicant at a disadvantage while we wait on other things that may or may not be coming actually down the pike. I see Amelia.
To both of those points, maybe an ask I can make of the applicant team. This is not something I would condition approval on, but it is something I would maybe encourage exploration of. I know that it is much more difficult to build, it's much more difficult to amend an existing building in terms of adding height if you have not previously considered the structure for that. So I would ask maybe if the applicant team thinks that there is a future where they would happily accept increased zoning here, whether that was something that might be able to be amended during construction if Medford moves very quickly, or something that could be done down the road. It might be worth taking an additional look now to see how you could set yourselves up for an easier process in that. Which, split the difference a little bit, if that's not something you've given consideration to yet.
Thank you, Amelia. Lynn.
Amelia and I had the exact same thought. What she was referring to is called planned densification. And so a lot of developers will essentially build the first or second floor as though the building will be 4 stories, but only build the first 2 and wait until see what the market kind of pulls out. So I think Amelia's got it exactly right. It's not, wouldn't be part of a conditional approval, but it might give John greater kind of flexibility if the first story was planned to, because again, you've got to think about weight bearing, et cetera, et cetera. So now you're building the first story as though it could go up to, say, as many as 4 stories. And now if Medford moves forward with mixed use, it could then also have residential. Because one of the questions I had was, you know, it's probably going to be $300, $400 a square foot for storage. That felt like a very high price. But if at some point the building could be converted to mixed use, it would be a twofer. It would not only bring in additional revenue to Mr. Wood, but at the same time, it would help alleviate some of the housing shortage, particularly given its location with the metro. So I liked exactly how Amelia framed it up as a consideration for you all at this juncture, not conditional on improvement, but how would the first floor need to change if it needed to go up 4 floors?
I think, Lynn, we would welcome if the applicant were to come to us with a revised plan set that might be able to effectuate that. We certainly can't condition it or require it at this point, but I don't know if I have not built buildings. A lot of folks on this board and you all have, so I trust your expertise in being able to present to us something that's both a short-term and maybe a long-term plan too. So I don't know if that's something that you've considered or something that you would maybe like to consider just as a kind of like an FYI or a modified plan in a few weeks when we reconvene.
So if I could just intervene here. So the Tavis had mentioned that we were keeping some of the building, and the part of the building that we are keeping are 2 large steel beams that would potentially hold the second floor, a third floor, and potentially a 4th floor. So those beams are staying in place. The plan is to hopefully someday down the road go higher. But because of the situation with Medford, and as it's been discussed in length, that my hands were tied. So my engineer did come up with the plan to keep the steel beams that are currently there. That would allow for a 3rd floor, but he would have to do further testing for a 4th. But at the very least, the beams will remain, and they will be hopefully someday used for additional floors as just exactly the reason why is to gain as much value as I can and income out of the buildings. I would love to have tenants above me someday. But again, I've been waiting so long and trying to get this done because I'm kind of like getting pulled from 2 different directions. Medford was pulling one end and Somerville's pulling on the other, and I'm in the middle. But it's been almost nearly 5 years of trying to get this, to the finish line, and it feels close. I feel like I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I just hope that, next month I get, the white smoke is is burning, because I'd love to, move forward and get this property taken care of and move into it someday.
I like the fact that I appreciate the fact that you explained leaving those beams and kind of future proofing the building.
Yeah.
in a capacity. So I think
Yeah.
that's definitely in your vision for the building. If you can get there, I think
100%.
it's something that we all share. So
Yeah,
I very
definitely.
much appreciate that. So outside of some of the questions that and the requests that Michael and the board members made for next meeting, is there anything else that anybody would like to raise at this time, or can we let the applicant and his team go for the evening and reconvene? Okay. Chairman Lynch.
Mr. Chair, and to the members of the board, I'm being dinged for land use. I've got to leave you.
We're going to continue this to the 17th, Joe, and we're going to leave comment open until the 11th. And then I anticipate we're going to take this up and close it out on the 17th.
To you and
Hip,
the
hip,
board.
hooray.
To you and the board, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Good
Of
night,
course.
everyone.
Always welcome.
Thank you all.
Yep. Thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
So the planning board will leave the written testimony open until Friday, the 11th of July at, what do we do, 9 o'clock, Steve?
That's correct. We do 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock a.m. On Friday, July 11th, planning board at somervillema.gov. Thank you all very much.
Good night.
Thank you. The only other agenda item that we have is the Assembly Square Neighborhood Plan. I know we have Sarah still with us. So what we did a few weeks ago was have, oh, I see Amelia, sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I just want to acknowledge that I did miss the previous meeting where the initial presentation of the Assembly Square Neighborhood Plan was presented, but I've reviewed the video and submitted the required affidavit.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we did have a great presentation by Sarah. We had some nice discussion and comments by everybody on the board, with the exception of Amelia, who happened to be absent for that meeting, but she is back, and I wanted to make sure that certainly Amelia, and as well as anybody else who wants to add to what they have already weighed in on, can make their opinion and thoughts known. So I'm gonna,
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yep. Yeah.
I just wanted to give you an update because I did take the comments that were made back to both mobility and engineering to make sure that we could check on that. So I do have some markups from engineering and a clarification on the stormwater issue. As we suspected, the thought bubble, for lack of a better term, while infiltration in assembly is limited, it is not forbidden. So that will give clarification to that. I am still working through with engineering how we might be able to address the district energy conversation. The other piece that I did clarify is the elevated bike path reference. And Michael, I think you called this one. It's actually on the bridge. It's not a true, it is elevated as in curb height, not as in a bike bridge. So that's another thing that we'll go in and check that reads properly, because I think that language is misleading.
Even Sarah, even still, then because I raised it, it didn't show that it was a bike path. So even if it's on the road, elevated above at curb height, it still is a bike path that should be on that bike path map that I had all the page numbers, like should be on like page 90 or 190.
Yeah, 86 and 97.
Yeah, so it should be included in the map on 97. Thank you, that was incredibly detailed. You all were probably looking for broader comments, but.
And I think those were most of the ones that I was coordinating on. The other piece that was the comment about connectivity to the 10 Hills neighborhood, and just like the district energy with engineering, I'm still working with mobility on how we can most effectively address that piece. So those are just, thank you for letting me sort of dive into those bits that we had started talking about last time.
Amelia, let's go.
I'm just want to give anyone a chance to ask their follow-up questions first. I'm again sorry to have missed the meeting and dragged this out, but thank you for the opportunity to add some comments.
This is a massive thing. This isn't dragged out.
Well, as my colleagues said in the previous meeting, Sarah and Steve, like overall, I think this is an excellent plan. So thank you very much. I know there's been a lot of time and effort that's gone into it, as well as perhaps some gnashing of teeth at moments. So, thank you. I have a number of comments and questions, and I don't want them to sound too critical, but I'm going to try and just run through them quickly in the interest of not making everyone else sit through this for too much longer. First, I did want to echo, Michael articulated it well, I think, in the previous meeting, but the opportunity for district energy or microgrids here is something that I know you've heard me go on about when we've had FRIT applications before us for this project. And this is certainly one of the few areas of Somerville where there's a real opportunity for that. So I know that it's something that's probably not top priority for engineering, but I think that given the city's goals and the handful of opportunities that exist, it's something that if there is a moment to try to leverage that in here, it would be really wonderful to see. This is an overarching comment which you may have sort of addressed in the preamble of your presentation last time, so my apologies if I'm glossing over it, but big picture, I do understand that this planning effort was sort of started in 2018, 2019. We hit the public comment period in 2020. It was revised somewhat in 2022. That leaves us in a situation where there are a lot of citations throughout it that are almost a decade out of date. So thinking about like the housing trends data, the population trends data, some of the sustainability and stormwater maps, I understand that revisiting this might not be a good use of staff time. So I defer to you as how you want to handle this, but it gives me pause to adopt a plan that's referencing projections from 2017 to 2030 when we're here in almost 2026. So I just want to ask that question, broad strokes of, is there, sorry, I know you know.
I do, and they were updated in 2024. So as we had each of the divisions and the experts go through and look at their pieces and make sure whatever needed to be done. So the economic development, OSE, we added the update to climate forward has been done. So all those references have been updated based on the inclusion of even the bicycle network plan. All those have been updated and included, but I will do another check just to make sure.
I think particularly in the sort of population and housing stock sections, it looked to me like they were maybe referring to some pretty old numbers. And then there were some comments about sort of all the great things we're doing under the new LEED 4.0 rating system. Which is a really minor one, but just we're a few versions past that. So that was just one. Thank you for taking a look at that. I appreciate it. And I appreciate that the other items had been updated and I clearly wasn't tracking them all. So thank you very much. On page, I notated the page numbers for your reference, but I don't have it all in front of me. On page 45, there was a note suggesting that all ground floor uses require a special permit. And I don't know if that's what is in place today. But it struck me as unnecessarily burdensome. I know we've had a lot of applicants that have come before us with sort of proposed modifications to ground floor uses, and I think that the attention to detail that the city is giving to sort of the need for a reasonable level of activation, especially on some of those public, you know, like festival streets or whatever we call them, and green spaces is very important, but I think it's probably discouraging to development to have literally all ground floor uses require special permits. So I would encourage us to not go down that path, or think carefully about it if we are. I'd love to understand if there are more action items that were considered or could be considered with respect to the sea level rise projections. And I guess I often have this curiosity when plans come before us about whether the either water tightness or sort of sorry, all my vocabulary slipped my mind. Whether being adaptive to water coming into the building or being watertight against infiltration, like whether we are doing enough in our sustainability survey that we have applicants fill out as part of their projections here, looking at the sort of 2070 projected sea level rise maps and the sort of note like the dam probably won't function for this. It's like, okay, what are we doing to require applicants to make sure their buildings are going to be, and I did try to look in the action items to see if there was something more specific there, and it seemed like it was mostly putting the burden on the city to look at other infiltration and sort of runoff technologies, as opposed to taking any harder look at what the buildings themselves should be doing. So it may be that that's a building code issue and not a zoning issue. It may be that we're already requiring everything we can, but it struck me as a point of curiosity. And then on the heels of our recent review of one of the lab buildings in the sort of Middlesex Avenue corridor zone, I did want to ask about, you know, in that process, I think there was a lot of sensitivity in the neighborhood about the shadow impacts to 10 Hills. And I know that the staging of the height was very carefully done to take advantage of the opportunity to have taller buildings serve as a buffer against air quality issues along the highway. All the same, this plan does land with some of the highest intended zoning in this neighborhood in that corner that does cast really substantial shadows in 10 Hills. We heard from a number of community members at that time and sort of had a lot of discussion amongst the board about the appropriateness of some of that. So I would be curious to understand better what the community engagement participation from 10 Hills was, if we have any shadow studies that show for the remaining unpermitted, not yet project permitted parcels in that area, what the shadow impacts of the heights as we're projecting them would be. You know, I'm loath to reduce the density of anything here, but I do wonder about just making sure that that feels like it's been done equitably and thoughtfully. You know, on the subsequent pages, there were a lot of attention to the shadows that would be cast on sort of the internal roadways to the site and the internal green spaces. And I think we should be giving that same level of consideration to the neighborhood abutting. And then 2 items where there was just sort of a formatting thing. On page 89, there's a paragraph that sort of stops mid-thought. And then in some of the action items in the appendix, there are a number where you sort of only get the first line of the sentence and not the second. So I'm both curious what they say and wanted to bring that to your attention. I think that was all. Thank Thank you so much. This is overall really great to see, and I'm glad to see it making progress.
Sarah, would you like to weigh in?
Sorry, I was
Mhm,
still
but-
scribbling feverishly. Yeah, there have been some formatting issues throughout the document that has been kind of giving me fits, but we will get there on those. I will go back and look at who the attendees might have been from the Ten Hills neighborhood. If I can find that information, that might have been something that wasn't shared with us by the consultant team, but I will look for that. And I do believe that when they did the shadow studies were modeled of the original of sort of the massing that came out of the planning process, the public process. Since then, those heights have obviously gone up along the Middlesex corridor. So there might be somewhere between what those particular projects have submitted and what was done as part of the charrette process. We can definitely look at those.
For the one, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the street number, someone else might, but for the one that was recently before us, I remember specifically looking at it to understand whether they were asking for something that was more equal to or more than what was called for in the neighborhood plan. And I think given the concerns that other board members had already raised at that point about the shadows from that building, I was surprised to see that it was exactly what had been called for in the plan. So I'm happy to step away from that one in the spirit of overall planning, but Mike, sorry, Hap, I don't know if this is one that you had thoughts on. I know we had gone back and forth on that a little bit. So thank you for your consideration.
Oh, Amelia, I love the fact that you always dig so deeply into some of these things. And I think you raise a lot of good points. And what I'm hoping for is maybe not tonight, but at the 17th, we might have a little bit of a response and modification from Sarah on some of the concerns that you raised. So that we can move forward on this. As you indicated, it's been going on since 2017, and another 3 weeks is not 4 weeks is not going to make or break the Assembly Square neighborhood.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Who else? First of all, Jahan, you're making us all look like absolute scrubs. I'm wearing a Madras shirt because it's a gazillion degrees and you're in a tie.
Mr. Chair, as you can see from my background, I'm still at the office, therefore the tie was necessary.
Also probably deeply air conditioned.
I would say so.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions for Sarah or for the board at this time? I know we had a nice robust discussion a few weeks ago, but Amelia's obviously raised some things because she's had an opportunity to review and engage in the discussion. But I think we are in a place where I think we're very nearly there. I think we're hoping to just get a little bit of more perfection. Sarah. Yeah, Lynn.
Sarah, since we're kind of at the end of Assembly Square, I have a kind of procedural question, and this may not be appropriate, Michael, and if it's not, you can say, let's talk about it another time. But Amelia talked about district energy, and I had just come from a meeting talking to somebody they mentioned, district energy at Summer Nova. And the one question I didn't ask about our prior candidate was around green infrastructure on their landscaping. So I'm wondering, and that came up in Assembly Square, is there a way that we can, or the city can kind of, like, what is the policy around district energy or around green infrastructure kind of more broadly? So it's not just by neighborhood plan, but rather here's the broad kind of goal that we're trying to achieve within the city, and all of the subsequent plans will kind of fall into place, or follow that. So I'm frustrated, it's not the right word, but let's just go with it at the moment, of the kind of piecemeal nature. And I kind of want to pull up to say, hey, how can we do district energy in Somerville? Is there a way to pilot it? How can we have a policy around green infrastructure? And I feel we're reacting, and I would love to have us get into a position where we can be a little bit more proactive. Again, not necessarily a la Assembly Square, but when the Broadway corridor plan comes before us, I'm going to be looking at green infrastructure. Amelia's going to be looking at district energy. How can we kind of get ahead of this? Is there a process that we can engage, or you guys have it all covered and we just haven't gotten there yet?
Lynn, we've been trying to get to some of these big, broad issues now for a number of years. And I think one of the thoughts that we had was have a broader discussion with planning staff and with our city experts on what is the plan that different departments have, where are we going, both department by department as well as holistically. So for the particular Assembly Square plan, I think the approach is kind of take the plan as it is, and for some of these bigger issues, continue our engagement with staff. I've been meaning, we just had 14 million joint hearings about everything under the sun for the last couple of months, so we haven't had a great opportunity to engage the way that we have in the past. But I do want to invite city staff in to have a discussion with us on things like this. So I think that's valuable and important.
Mr. Chair, if I might, you're exactly right. And so one of the things that we have been doing currently internally is PPZ has had meetings with all the divisions that basically do long range planning of one description or another. So we have done basically internal focus groups to look at what the different specialties are planning on doing over the next 5 years, for example. So we finished our last one this week and are going to cull that information into understanding what this looks like. Also from the point of trying to avoid participatory fatigue that very often happens if, sort of, we did the Broadway corridor study looking at the zoning, and then if mobility is coming in to put in a bike lane, then there's another public meeting for that sort of thing. So that's what we're trying to coordinate internally. At the same time, where a lot of this information, these policies, or these, not necessarily policies, but the directions are set, would be in SummerVision. We are about to the point that we're working with SummerVision 2040. It is about time for us to start looking at what SummerVision 2050 would be. And so there are a lot of things that might not have been addressed in the 2040 version, that as these particular issues should be brought up as part of the larger 2050 rewrite. So I'm hoping that, because that would be, summer vision, of course, is the comprehensive plan, is the starting point for any of this work. And that would be the right place to address a lot of those issues. So there's sort of like a couple of things going on, you know, sort of what's happening in the meantime, and then where we need to be for the bigger picture in the long run. So, but point well taken, and we're trying, we're thinking about it.
Excellent. Thank you, ma'am.
Anybody else for Sarah while we've got her? Sarah, I look forward to continuing this in a couple of weeks with you. With no other business before the planning board at 7:46 p.m. I see Luke's hand.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I have a something I wanted to raise that's not regular business. If you'll indulge me, just raise
It depends on what that is, because it may need to have been noticed.
Yeah, so I think this fits the non-noticeable stuff, but cut me off and tell me not, if not. It has to do with the process we go through for recommending zoning amendments to the land use committee. And I think what we transmitted to the city council on the Summer Nova project is really confusing for the public. I went deeper on it due to a confusion that a friend of mine flagged for me. And so I'd love to share my thoughts about what's confusing about what we did. I thought it might merit like a big process change. The more I thought about it, I actually don't think there's a big process change we need, but I'd love to raise the issue either now or happy to wait to a future meeting, but it's on my mind because it happened this week in the lead up to the council voting on Summer Nova.
What do you got?
So this friend of mine saw online discussion leading up to the council vote describing the planning board as having told the city council to reduce the height and scale of Summer Nova. And I saw that and thought, I don't think that's what we did, but it was a few months ago, I genuinely might have misremembered. So I went through the archive. I first pulled up our meeting minutes, and I saw in the meeting minutes, oh no, we approved everything. There were a couple votes where it was 6-0. One of them was, or two of them I think were 5-1 votes. Then I got the transmittal letter that we sent to the council, and this helped me appreciate in a way that, this is on me, that I hadn't appreciated. The transmittal letter actually has language that's sometimes different and more detailed than what's in our meeting minutes. That had the votes recorded just as I described, but also did have language that I'll just read it here. The board otherwise expressed general support for the amendment with strong reservations about the height and scale. So then I said, that seems somewhat contradictory. So then I pulled up the video and just went back to the video. And I think there's a way in which that really does reflect the conversation. Several members expressed concern about the height. Then you, Mr. Chair, in the wind up to the actual vote, this is how we've done this process, where we recommend that Steve or planning staff incorporate the discussion into what gets transmitted to the council. So it all just adds up to, I think what we did is genuinely very confusing, where we voted to recommend the height and density of these proposals, but then we paired it with language that says we didn't like the height and density. I think there's some truth to that. Several members didn't like the height and density. I chimed in very briefly. I was like rooting for myself, looking at the video, like hoping I said something about being supportive of the height and density. I said it really quickly because I was concerned about not spending too much time on things that was just a recommendation anyway, as we're all constantly saying to ourselves. So it's just a weird situation. And I think the main thing I think reflecting on this is I don't think we should be voting on things before we have the language that we're going to send to the city council. And then we'll be giving much clearer guidance one way or the other. And I think that might lead to more split votes, which might just more genuinely reflect the sentiment of the group. Like, I think if we had to actually vote on the heights of Summer Nova, it might have been more like a 4-2 vote or something. Who knows how it would have shaken out, but I don't think we gave good guidance in that process.
So I'll just say this, Luke, because they are recommendations and because they are not on a proposal certain, we have always had vote, particularly where they're more complicated, where we give a recommendation, generally on the sentiment of the board, but we also tend to give reflections on, if I were in your shoes, here is what I would look at. Here's what we encourage you to look at. Here's what we had concerns about that because we are not the body that votes on zoning amendments. We are the body that makes recommendations. And where the board is truly split, or is less than enthusiastic about a particular proposal for a number of reasons. Instead of having, 4-2 votes or whatever it is, we tend to go on a much more neutral recommendation and make a neutral recommendation. And sometimes add some color commentary to why the recommendation was neutral. With this particular applicant and amendment, the board generally was supportive, as the votes reflect, of doing something. So we recommended, as I recall, approval generally of it, but please take under consideration as the land use committee and the city council goes through its process, to take these things under consideration that we think can be more perfect. Because they are recommendations, unless we really want to get into the weeds, I as one member am always cognizant of the fact that we are not elected. We are an appointed body that is confirmed by the Board of Aldermen. And we do not, under our ordinances and under state law, have the ability to vote on the specifics. So we can be, and we have been, by the way, as I recall from our parking discussion, we can be incredibly nuanced, incredibly detailed, and the land use committee can say, thanks very much, I don't care. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. So I as one person, I'm always hesitant to incorporate more detail into actual recommendations than not, because that is not our role. Our role is to make a general recommendation on, do we think this is generally a good idea or not? And if we think it's a good idea, how can we make it more perfect? Or if we don't think it's a good idea, here's why we don't think it's a good idea. So I'm always of the opinion that where it comes to a recommendation, I want to be as generally supportive or neutral or not supportive as the board is, but also put in as part of the recommendation generally a summary of where the board's at. If we were in your shoes, what would we do? Because the vote was not, because the proposal was not reduce the height. So the recommendation is on what's in front of us. The recommendation, which was whatever the height was of someone over, right? 500 feet, whatever it was. Generally, we're supportive of bigger height. So on what's in front of us, how am I voting? Color commentary aside and discussion leads to, I think, that inclusion of the board's discussion to see where the land use committee and the council shake out. That's how I view it. If the board thinks it's in our interest to make incredibly detailed recommendations that may or may not just be us sitting there talking at each other very nicely, that the land use committee then decides to eschew, okay, that we can do that. I'll stay here till however long.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I'm genuinely curious for other people's reactions too, so I don't want to make this too much of a back and forth, but just really quickly. In this case, I would not have voted for the language that we sent to the council had that language been in front of me. And I don't think anybody did anything wrong. Like, this really is consistent with the practice that we've done on these letters. But so I think one version of this is almost identical to what we've done. It's just, let's make sure we have the language in front of us before we take the vote. The key thing I think doesn't work that we're currently doing is voting and then having the language added on later as best Steve can. You know, it's just an impossible position, I think. And, you know, there's other elements of it that your comments raised too that I think are worth wrestling with. But at a minimum, I, as one member, feel like, we didn't get this right as a reflection of my sentiment on things.
So the practice has always been that the chairman reviews and signs off. Otherwise, because we're under a time clock to get a recommendation to the land use committee. And in many circumstances, we do it at the last minute just based on timing. So if the idea is then to get proposed language in front of all members of the board so that we can weigh in to make sure that, you know, 6 people are in alignment that the precise language is where we need to be, we're not going to meet our statutory requirement to get a recommendation in.
My proposal on this, to be specific, would be we do it on the fly at that meeting. We have, you know, whatever, and it would take a little bit more time. It would force some discipline on getting it, and it's tough co-writing. But I don't think this middle ground is working.
If I may, Luke, I think there might be a middle ground. I suggested it because I identified this as an issue as well, and I've been in Michael's seat before, running board meetings. And what I suggested is that we have a Google Doc that's open because there's open meeting law. So it's a Google Doc that the public can quote unquote have read access to, but not edit access. We have edit access, and a note goes out by Steve to say, you've got 36 hours to put in your comment. And if you don't meet this timeline, then everybody, you know, forever hold your peace. That there's this kind of middle way that we might be able to kind of finesse after the meeting, and still meet the statutory requirements, because I think getting into wordsmithing in real time might be difficult. So I was thinking kind of more of a middle way forward. I don't know. That might not be possible at all. Sorry, I just jumped in, Michael.
Okay. Amelia.
I would also propose a potential alternative middle ground, because I would have imagined that the Google Doc approach was an open meeting law violation. So in lieu of that, or as one alternative to be considered for that, rather than do the wrap up that we normally do, that is like, in light of the discussion that's been had tonight, we vote to make the motion. Would it be useful to try to articulate at least the bullet points at the conclusion to say, all right, like we could have more discipline potentially about the concepts that are to be incorporated at the stage that we are voting, rather than the sort of it, you know, in light of all the discussion, which does leave some room for interpretation and for folks to feel like their comments were not accurately reflected. If we were to say, we are taking this motion to reflect that there was discussion about reducing heights, and that would be the point at which Luke could object if he were so inclined. Just throwing out their idea out there.
I think that's not a bad idea, to have a little bit more discussion on specifically what that discussion entails as it relates to what's going to be reflected into the recommendation. Yeah. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Member Schuster for raising this matter, because I do recall the discussion that this board had regarding the height restriction. I think just to speak specifically about this instance, the attempt, or at least my perceived attempt, our understanding of the attempt was to provide a recommendation while encompassing the varied views of the board, which there were certain strong opinions, and I happen to agree with some of those opinions. I do think that we should have some sort of mechanism, which Member Richards and Vice Chair Aboff have mentioned. I'm in favor of both, potentially both mechanisms to provide a little bit more clarity, but I do want to mention that we haven't had such, I don't want to use the word sharp exchange, but varied opinions about some of these land use committee matters where we're providing recommendations in all instances. For example, just today's recommendation was very quick, and I understand that that's also an outlier. So I think we do need to seek out middle ground. I do think that what Member Schuster brought up was helpful, and I do encourage us to consider that whether there's avenues for us to at least be able to view the language without overly burdening, whether it's the time requirement or overly burdening, the staff. Particularly, I'm thinking of Steve in this matter. So I think we could reach a reasonable conclusion here, but I just wanted to contextualize the circumstances that we were facing in that meeting, and in comparing it to the meeting that we've had today, where we were able to quickly pass the recommendation. So that's all I want to say, but thank you, Member Schuster.
Let's do this then. Let's think about a way that we can find a way to maybe modify some of the ways that we do recommendations, whether it's more in-depth discussion at the time, or if there's something else, because I am always considerate of the time period between when we need to make a recommendation to the land use committee under state law. So yeah, Amelia.
I just wanted to add, I don't know, Luke, if the individual that you heard from who had sort of generated the question was someone who had gone through those records and looked at the recommendation, but I will say, I have been aware as a longtime member of this board that there are people who live tweet the board meeting and provide a lot of anecdotal summary content, and there is, no matter what we do, no matter how good a job we do, we will never be able to control that. So I commend your instinct to try to get things clarified in all of the sort of documents that are legally relevant, but I didn't want to gloss over that either. That's
just a quick response. I don't know where they found it, but it's funny because initially the text this friend sent me, I thought, that's crazy. That's not at all what we did. And so it sent me down this rabbit hole to pull up the minutes, to pull up the letter. The language in the letter below the vote, there's a piece of the language that's almost identical to what he texted me. Because there's language in our letter that's like discomfort with the heights or something. So I was like, oh, so it's just, that's part of what was interesting about this experience. Yeah.
And it may well have been that. I just wanted to note that certainly, no matter how well we document what our intention, our conclusions, folks who are taking things out of context that are from the course of the meetings is something we will never be able to really write, I don't think.
No, I really appreciate that. Mr. Chair, can I do just rapid fire? I want to be so quick, and then I know you were getting us to a place that I about to get to us to a place which I suspect is going to be good. I just want to emphasize, I don't think anyone here has any ill intent in what led to this confusion. I just want to really emphasize that. I think what we did through here is consistent with how the process has been. And I just think this manifested some confusion. And I think it's probably an outlier, so I don't think we should sweat it too much. But there have been a couple times when we voted on recommendations where I have been a little uncomfortable, like just a little unsure about my vote on the actual language with what we're adding to it. And my best, I think what's happening here is we have such a desire to reach consensus. And so some people are kind of not totally comfortable with the recommendation, but if we add some language, then that's something that a few other people can be comfortable with. And so we all have something we can be comfortable with, and then that gets us to a unanimous vote. So I think the spirit is all productive, but I think I want to be more comfortable with, sometimes we don't have consensus, and I think that's just true, and that's okay. I like Amelia's recommendation also, and I think that probably adds a couple minutes, but hopefully not 30 minutes to these, just bulleting it, because my concern's not with the wordsmithing. In this case, it's very material. The heights of Summer Nova, it's not about, is it a native planter on the corner or something? It's like pretty central to the whole thing. So a bullet approach would have helped us just get that, I think. So thank you.
Discussion on a different day on the best way to move forward on maybe amending some of our recommendation practices. I think that's a good idea. I think everybody's somewhat in alignment there. Okay. Anybody else that wants to raise anything for the good of the meeting? Michael raised a good point that we didn't actually formally continue Broadway. So what I'd like to do is formally move to continue 483 Broadway to the meeting on July 17th, seconded by Amelia. Steve, roll call.
This is Steve Carey, on the motion, John Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Lynn Richards,
Aye.
Amelia Aba,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. Agenda items continued 8:07 p.m. There's nothing left on the planning board's agenda. The chair moves to adjourn, seconded by Amelia. Steve.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Lynn Richards,
Aye.
Aba,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Yep. Okay. Have a good night, everybody. See you in a
Thank
few
you.
weeks.
Thank you so much.